Welcome into the Big Little Podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Patrick Previty. That is Andrew Greig. LeBron hurt his groin again. The conference tournaments for college basketball, men's college basketball, starts up this upcoming week. So we're going to start with that first. We're going to go through our picks for the main conferences, ACC, Big 12, Big 10, SEC, and the Big East. And we're going to give our selections for each of them and why we chose them. First off, Andrew, we're going to start with the ACC.
ACC, I have Duke coming out of the ACC tournament. Obviously, this is a team that you've been looking at all season long. Cooper Flag comes in. Not everyone knows or actually knew about Cooper Flag, I felt like, until the NBA Select, or not NBA, but Team USA Select tournament. That happened when he was like dunking on people and LeBron was giving him shout outs and whatever. But since then, I feel like he's gotten a lot of notoriety. He was considered one of the best players in college basketball without even playing a game in college basketball. I feel like we had a segment in a different show that we did where we talked about, would Cooper Flag be the best college basketball player in college basketball? And I think he's, at least from my perspective, I don't know how you feel, but I think he's lived up to the hype. And I think he's had a phenomenal freshman season. He leads Duke in points, rebounds, blocks, steals, assists. He is their go-to guy. He does it all for them on the court. If you look at a Duke game, you can't watch Duke game without saying that Cooper Flag did have a major impact on them. And the impact that he's having is done wonders. They're 19-1 in conference play. They're one of the best teams in all of college basketball, with Auburn losing twice now, two straight games. They should be the number one team in the country. They have essentially locked up a number one seed, win or lose the ACC tournament, but I think that they will have no problem sweeping through it. Their only conference loss this season was to Clemson on the road in a game where Cooper Flag, I don't know if you remember that. It was a little bit of a funny clip. It made its rounds on Twitter, so a lot of people saw it, but he slipped at the end. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, where he broke his shoe.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, besides that, they've been perfect all season during conference play. They're one of the best teams, if not the best team in the country. They have a couple other guys that do a lot for them. They have a 7'2" freshman, Kamon, who has played every single game as their center. He's their second leading blocks leader, which I think is funny because Cooper Flag leads the team in blocks over a 7'2" center. But they have a lot of good players on that team, and I just think that they're coming out of the ACC tournament. It would kind of shock me if anybody else won the ACC tournament, but I mean, it's possible. It's March.
Oh yeah, of course. It is definitely March, but I'm not going in any sort of different direction here. I'm going to take Duke as well. Like you said, Cooper Flag, it's pretty much just about as far, he will take them as far as he possibly can, and it won't be up to just anybody else. You mentioned the dominance in conference play. They have 17 conference wins, 23.2 points is their average margin of victory against conference opponents. And mainly the question might be just how far can this team go in the actual March Madness bracket? And
I think they recently got the last two wins in conference play, so they're up to 19-1 in conference play.
Excuse me. Yeah, then 19 win, and I'm
It's
sure that
game.
number probably went down a little bit, but you still get the point. And also, the ACC isn't as strong this year as it has been in recent years. That's been a big talking point. So I don't see why anybody could go against Duke, at least in the conference tournament.
To add on to that point, though, they've had 8 straight wins, right? And I'm just going to read down the list of them. 21-point win against Cal, 36-point win against Denver, 18-point win against Virginia, 43-point win against Illinois, 37-point win against Miami, 35-point win against FSU, 33-point win against Wake Forest, and 13-point win against the rival UNC on the road. Just one of the best teams in college basketball. You don't see that type of dominance from a lot of college basketball teams. Not only are they winning, they're winning by a lot. And I'm not a big Duke fan personally. They beat up on my Canes twice this season by over 30 points, but I mean, there's not much you can say. That Cooper Flag has the team rolling.
Okay, let's go to the SEC.
SEC, Florida. Oh man, I just mentioned that I'm a Miami fan, so this hurts me to say. Obviously, we have football, so I'll take that. But Miami's just not playing well in basketball either way, so it doesn't really matter. But Florida, I think, is the second best team in the nation. We just talked about who I think is the first best team in the nation. I think Florida follows them right up. They have Walter Clayton Jr., who's been their best player for 2 seasons straight now. It feels like he's averaged over 17 points a game in both of those seasons. He's one of their best leaders on that team. And then you have a guy like Elijah Martin, who comes in as a transfer from FAU. And he was, I don't know if you remember, obviously you remember the FAU Final Four run. He was the leader on that team. He's one of the leaders on that team. He scored 26 points in the loss against SDSU when that buzzer beating loss in the Final Four. Just one of the better players on that team. He comes into Florida, brings everything with him. If anything, he takes another step in the right direction. And this team has beaten two number one teams in the country. They have a bunch of top ranked wins. Obviously, the SEC has been one of the the best conference in all of college basketball. I think that the Florida Gators have stood out to me as the best team. Auburn is currently the favorite, which I mean, the odds will probably shift on that a little bit given the fact that they just lost to rival Alabama. But there's no real wrong way you can go with them with this pick. Auburn's been ranked number 1 in the country. Tennessee's been ranked number 1 in the country. Florida has been up in the top 3. Auburn, Alabama has also been. The SEC has just dominated the top 5 this year, so it's hard to make a definitive pick. But Florida, in my opinion, is the best team in the SEC, and I think that they can take it.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you. And I would say that Florida is probably the team that has, from start to finish, been the most reliable throughout this year. And like you said, Walter Clayton Jr., I trust him more so in like the late game scenarios. And I definitely think they have enough size to match up with Janai Broome. If it's not Cooper Flagg to win the Wooden Award, it's Janai Broome. So much respect to Auburn. Could see it going both ways. At the end of the day, this kind of conference tournament isn't going to be the make or break. These teams are looking towards later on in March and into early April, potentially. That's where their mind is set. Okay, let's go to the Big Ten.
Big Ten. My pick for the Big Ten is Wisconsin, which is a little bit of a sleeper pick. They're currently at plus 660 if anybody wants the odds on that. I think they're the third ranked team based off the odds. But Wisconsin's been a great team all season long. I feel like they've been slept on a little bit. You wouldn't, based off how much notoriety they get, they're the number 12 team in the country. You think they'd get a little bit more talking to. The SEC has dominated all of the news media this season, so that's kind of the reason why as well. But they have 2 Johns on their team. John, sorry.
I threw you a little bit of a curveball. We were supposed to go to the Big 12 first, but I sent us to the Big 10. But
you're good. They have John Blackwell, who has been phenomenal for them this season. Like in any game that you watch of Wisconsin basketball, you notice who John Blackwell is. He's taken a 7-point jump in points per game this season. He's been one of the best players on that team, if not in all of college basketball, averaging 15 points a game. He's been like one of 2 John guards that they have that has been just really stood out to me this season. And I just really like the way that they play. I think that anyone can really make a run in the Big Ten tournament. Obviously, you have Michigan State, who has been the top of the class of the Big Ten for it feels like a while now. That conference is never really the best basketball conference. Obviously, you have the days where Michigan State were dominating a lot, but they've definitely fallen off this year. They're the 3rd, if not the 4th best basketball conference this season. So definitely taking a step back. But given that, I think anyone can take it. And Wisconsin is my personal pick to come out of the Big Ten this year.
I really think it's a 4-team race here. Michigan State, Maryland, Michigan, and Wisconsin. I went with Michigan State. I wanted to go. I'm actually going pretty chalk here, but it'll be different as we get through the rest of this segment. I'm going to just side with Tom Izzo and those boys. They can't make a 3-point shot to save their lives, but they're still very suffocating on defense, and they shoot 80%, I believe, from the foul line on the season. That is the type of stat that you really like, especially when we're talking about stuff in March. But as you mentioned, the other teams, Michigan, Maryland, they deserve their flowers because at the end of the day, it could be all 4 of those teams, and Purdue's not too far behind either.
Yeah, and the 2 Johns I was talking about, John Tonje is the other John I wanted to mention. He's averaging 18-5 this season. He, like you talked about the charity stripe, that's obviously a huge part of any March tournament. You look at the conference tournaments, you look at March Madness. Feels like these games a lot of the time come down to free throw shooting at the end, and he shoots 91% as their best player. So those 2 guards, John Tonje and John Blackwell, are 2 guards to look into when you're looking at the Big Ten tournament this year, and maybe even a longer March run.
Also, I wanted to mention that Michigan State has beaten all 4 of the other teams that I mentioned, Wisconsin, Michigan, Purdue, and they beat also Illinois twice, which I think is something to mention. Obviously, we haven't talked about Illinois, but just throwing that out there. They're not too bad, 2011 on the year. Okay, let's go to the Big 12, where we were initially supposed to go right before the Big 10.
Oh, good. In the Big 12, I have Kansas coming out, and it's a little bit more of a sleeper pick than it usually is. They sit at plus 1,100 right now, which is the lowest odds that they've ever had. I feel like in a conference tournament run, they're always towards the top of the Big 12. They're currently the 6th best team in the Big 12, at least record wise. But given that being said, they are one of the better teams at playing everybody tough. You look at a Texas Tech game where they only lost by 6 points. You look at just a Houston game where Houston at home, they couldn't close it out against them, but it felt like they were there the whole game. And Hunter Dickinson is between Cooper Flagg, Hunter Dickinson, that was kind of the battle going into the season. I feel like Cooper Flagg has obviously proven that he's the better player. Hunter Dickinson is more experienced, has been in college basketball for 5 years now. But when he's on, nobody's stopping Hunter Dickinson in college basketball. And you see that in the Big 12. When he has his 30-point games, when he has his 20 and 10, he's averaging 17 and 10 for the season. Hunter Dickinson, Kansas goes as Hunter Dickinson goes. And if he can have a good conference tournament, I think that they can easily win. And also their path, the way the Big 12 tournament works is that there's double buys and then they have a single buy. Kansas has one of the single buys, but they'll play either the winner of UCF versus Utah. I don't think that they'll have a problem with either of those teams. And then they go on to play Arizona, who they literally just beat if they do win that game. And Arizona, I think, is a little bit more on the fraudulent side, just me personally. So I think that their path, being on the bottom side, not having to play Houston until what would be the final if they get there, is a little bit easier. Texas Tech, they play them hard this season already. So I could definitely see Kansas making a run in the Big 12 tournament.
So maybe my picks aren't going into the like Cinderella-esque run. I'm not choosing any other team. I think that isn't at the very top of the conference, but I'm going to go with Houston here. I think that just from top to bottom, they're a more complete team. They're shooting 40% from the 3-point line, and they are 10-0 away. And I just think that is going to bode well for them come conference tournament time and when you're playing in those neutral sites. So I will take Houston. Obviously the 10-0 away record is in conference.
Yeah, rightfully so, though. I think that I was looking down the list of Big 12 conference tournament winners, and there's never been a seed lower than 5 to win the conference tournament since 1997. So that's a fun stat for you. Kansas is actually 6, so I'm like going against that grain. But I mean, in 30 years of conference play, there's never been a Big 12 winner to be ranked lower than 5. So I feel like these March runs, it feels like the Cinderellas come from the actual March Madness tournament, or maybe like some of the Group of 5 tournaments or something like that, where you see lower seeds win. But it feels like when you get into the upper echelon of teams, like they're not losing their conference tournaments as much as you would see like some of the lower, like kind of worse conferences, I guess you could say.
Let's end out on the Big East here. I think we both have the same pick.
Yeah. And I don't know how many people are going against them just because the fact that they've had such a dominant regular season. Obviously, we're talking about St. John's. They being played in Madison Square Garden is also obviously a huge help to like St. John's case. The only thing I don't like about St. John's, before I even get to like why I do like them so much, is that they play a lot of close games. If you look at just their record against who they'd have to play in their first round game, they only beat, who would it be? Wait, I'm
also taking St. John's here as well. Team has just been completely different.
Like,
Second year under Rick Pitino.
Yeah. Well, if you want to go into your reason while I look at the bracket, how it shapes up. But the thing I was going to say is that the teams that they'd be playing in the bracket, they've beaten these teams by no more than double digits, which is a little scary because if you watch St. John's play, they're like they play a lot of close games, which is just scary because it always comes down to the wire. Obviously, they know how to play in these close games now that they've played in so many of them, but it's all like I can easily see St. John's getting knocked down in the second or third round. But against that point, the reason why I did pick them is because against the other top 5 teams in the conference, I think their record is 7-1. So they've been dominant against the best teams in that conference, and it's a down year for UConn. Obviously, Marquette has been good; they've been in the rankings for a significant period of time. But I think that St. John's is better than all of them. If depending on how far Auburn drops, St. John's will be in the top 5. They currently sit at 6. Auburn just lost 2 games to the number 1 team in the country. I don't know if they drop below St. John's, but St. John's could end the season as a top 5 in the country, which is absolutely absurd. I don't think anybody was expecting them to be there, and I think that St. John's can win the Big East tournament.
Well, I don't think I have anything to add to the St. John's pick. Shout out UConn, shout out Creighton, shout out Marquette. They certainly have a shot, but we'll end up seeing what ends up happening in the Big East Conference tournament. Well, those have been our conference tournament picks for college basketball. We'll see if we get them right. All right, let's move into
really quick. What I was saying was Providence and Butler. Providence, they beat by 2 points both times. They've only beaten Butler by 6 points. So just to what I was saying, they play a lot of close games, which is a little bit scary, but they can definitely make a run. That was it.
Yeah, that's going to get clipped out of the video, but that's okay.
Yeah, 100%.
We're going to go to LeBron James and his groin injury that he suffered. I believe was this last night or the other night. He's going to be out for 1 to 2 weeks. Now, the Lakers were streaking since they were able to figure things out pretty quickly with Luka Doncic. They've skyrocketed all the way up to the 2nd seed in the Western Conference. But unfortunately, I believe it was in the Celtics game, LeBron James now suffered an injury, and he will probably return to the team 12, 14 days from now. But it's one of those routine injuries, kind of happens around the same time every single year for LeBron. What does this do for the Lakers season?
I think it gives Luka an opportunity to shine even more so than what he already is. Obviously, LeBron
I like
James
that.
is a very ball dominant player. So you give Luka a little bit more of a chance to settle into the offense. I don't think it really hurts Lakers all that much. You have a team around him that is playing really well. Gabe Vincent has taken another step up. I don't know if you saw the clip where JJ Redick said he won them that game the other day against the Knicks. With the big three that he made, I think that it allows Luka to settle in even more so than he already is. And the Lakers do, like, obviously LeBron is such a great player, but I mean, this is kind of like a Luka Doncic x the Maverick. This is almost similar to that Mavericks team that they had when he was playing over there, where he can kind of be the main guy, and then he can kind of flush it out to everybody else. And they play really good defense with or without LeBron, which is kind of a staple of what they've been doing recently. So I don't think that changes all that much. And if you look at the LeBron minutes without Luka, they play really well. They play really well as well. Obviously, you don't want to lose your second possibly best player on that team. I lean second. I think Luka Doncic is the better player. I don't know how many people are arguing that right now, but I think it allows Luka Doncic to get more settled. And I don't think it'll affect them that much, especially because maybe I don't want to say this is load management, but he was able to make it through the majority of that Celtics game. So it could be a thing where we're coming up on the playoffs. The Lakers look like they're going to be they're going to have one of the better seeds in all of the Western Conference. I think it could be a situation where you give LeBron maybe a little bit longer rest than he needs, and then they'll still have one of those top seeds no matter what. And if they really start tanking after he leaves, then you could see a scenario where he is rushed back a little bit. But 1 to 2 weeks also doesn't sound like that extensive. It's not like he's going out for weeks on end, like 4 to 6 or anything like that. So
Yeah, it certainly doesn't sound that extensive. I only mentioned it just because I think that he, has had this injury before. So it's always just something that people want to monitor and just try to double check to make sure that he can come back. I loved your Luka take. I actually was not thinking that route. I was more so thinking about the standings, but I like that. We'll see if that can translate into wins. If he could just start going for 35, 40 points, really just taking over, honestly, because that's what he was doing with Dallas. So now it's kind of his team. Is he ready and comfortable to be able to do that? I mean, he's such a talented player. I definitely think he can. But right now, when I look at the standings, I do get a little bit concerned because the Lakers were 8-2 over the last 10 games. Like I said, shot up to the second seed. They're 40-22, but they're only 2 games ahead of the 5th seed Rockets. And maybe they're okay with playing a team like Memphis or Houston in the first round. And they're okay if they slide a little bit, because right now they'd be slotted to play, one of the play-in teams. But if they were to slide, to Denver, maybe they would draw the Warriors. Maybe they don't want to do that. But right now, whether or not they want to fall or not, I think that there's a real shot, because if Houston is on your back, so is the Grizzlies and Denver. I think you could get easily jumped if all of those teams are healthy and they're playing good basketball. We just saw Jokic have a 30-20-20 game. So he's coming. They're all on their way. I mean, they're tied essentially with Denver right now for the second seed. So, Denver's just played 2 more games than they have. So I could see them falling even if like Luka plays really, really lights out.
yeah,
That
no,
concerns me.
I mean, falling is is a word you can use just because of the fact that you mentioned it. There's such little separation between like the second and 5th seed at this point. I just think that from a Lakers perspective, you're probably not really worried about that many teams other than the Nuggets. Obviously, you have the Grizzlies, and they're coming off a season where they didn't even make the playoffs last year. Then you look at the Nuggets are obviously their biggest competition besides the Thunder, who you also like. I don't know. I won't even get into my Thunder takes.
I just feel like all those teams are so close together that if the Lakers were to fall to 4 or 5, they could still draw the Golden State Warriors, who could move up to 4 or 5. It's just such
Yeah.
a thing. It's just such a cluster right there that's where I get worried. I don't see any of the play-in teams actually giving them a run for their money. So I think that second seed is very valuable. Or what if the Nuggets also take a slide too? I mean, it's really close.
Yeah, I think with 20 games left, only missing 1 to 2 weeks won't hurt them all that much. If they play 5, 6 games in that time span and they just go 500, they'll probably be okay with where they're at in the seed, in like where they're seated. And the teams around them are playing well, but not as well as they have been. The Warriors are the closest ones to, or they have a better record over the last 10 games. The Warriors are 9-1 the last 10 games. But besides that, they're looking to make a run as well. But I think that Luka will be able to steer the ship enough where LeBron can come back in 2 weeks and they won't be the 6 seed at least. And then from there, if you have 15 games left in the season, anything can happen. None of those teams are going to get super far away from them either. So I definitely think that it could happen where they're the 5th seed when LeBron comes back. But I think Luka. I think Luka's a good enough player where he'll win some games just by himself, and the supporting cast around them legitimately is not bad.
That's what or that's what the Lakers got Luka to do, to take over. If LeBron is not out there to be able to play, it'll be a little bit of a preview to potentially 2, 3, 4 years from now, whenever it is just Luka in a Lakers uniform. They got the Nets, Bucks, Nuggets, Suns, Spurs over the next 5 games. So that's doable. They got the Nuggets again and the Bucks, but after that, but hopefully by then, maybe LeBron is gearing up to play.
Bad team split against the good teams. I feel like you'll be in the solid, which is legitimately just like all of basketball. But I think Luka can guide them through at least the Nets and maybe splitting through some of the better teams you named.
Yeah, I think you can get a win off the Spurs and the Suns. That's for sure.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, comparatively. All right, let's move into the DK Metcalf news. He got a new home and some more money to buy a home in Pittsburgh. He obviously got traded today from the Seattle Seahawks to the Pittsburgh Steelers. What are your first reaction?
Personally, I think this means that Aaron Rodgers is going to the Steelers. Maybe a hot take, but I think that you don't trade for DK Metcalf if you don't think you have a quarterback in mind. I don't think that they think Russell Wilson's that guy. They obviously don't. I don't think that anyone thinks that Justin Fields is that guy at this point. So Aaron Rodgers could be a serviceable person to get in there. I think that the odds on that should be like taking a lot more than they probably are. Aaron Rodgers to the Steelers makes just so much sense. We talked about it last time, but I think that if you're going to go out and trade for a DK Metcalf and then also extend him to the point where they're giving him one of the biggest contracts in wide receiver history, I think that you have to have somebody in mind. And I don't think that after the experiment that was last season, that is Russell Wilson. So my first reaction is that Aaron Rodgers or somebody else will be the next quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I think that will first be Aaron Rodgers. If they had their pick of the litter, I don't know if they're in the Sam Darnold category. We'll touch on that a little bit later, but I also think that it just makes their depth so much better because after George Pickens, there was no one on that team to throw to. So the fact that they were looking at Van Jefferson last year, it was kind of
that's when
how
you're in trouble.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that the fact that they have a 1-2 punch now in George Pickens and DK Metcalf is so much better for the Steelers. And if you look at that team, though, their offense and their passing game was the weakness of that team last year. They had Najee Harris was serviceable last year. Their defense is obviously always one of the best in the NFL. So the fact that they're able to kind of bolster their wide receiver group this season would be great for them. And I think it's a really good move. Not a move that I was particularly expecting, but I mean, if they can get Aaron Rodgers there too, that with Mike Tomlin, I think that they could be at least a 500 team when you go out on the limb.
Yeah, a super aggressive move for sure. So DK Metcalf got 5 years, $150 million. Is he worth $30 million roughly per year? Probably not, but he's a really good receiver. And as you mentioned, pairing him with George Pickens, who has never really had another guy right next to him for a good chunk of his career, especially as of late, that could totally elevate his game. And DK Metcalf has played alongside other good receivers, so he can certainly, find his way within that offense. I think it's really great. And I'm glad that you mentioned Aaron Rodgers because that is a spot that I think would fit. And it was something that people were talking about a couple of years ago. So now maybe it actually ends up happening. That is something to also watch out for. Now, this is a tale of two different franchises, right? The Seahawks blowing it up because they felt like they were not ready to invest in a win now move or any win now moves. They wanted to get rid of Geno Smith, cut Tyler Lockett, now trade DK Metcalf. Steelers, on the other hand, it makes sense. They're going to continue to be aggressive because there's no way that you can just half send this type of move. I wanted to bring up what has gone on with the Seahawks offseason within this past week. It's actually pretty insane what has gone on. They've cut Tyler Lockett, Draymond Jones, Roy Robertson-Harris, Rayshawn Jenkins, and George Fant. They traded Geno Smith to the Raiders for a third-round pick, and they traded DK Metcalf to the Steelers for a second-round pick, and they swapped or flipped their 6th and 7th as well this year. So they Like I said, they're in complete blow up rebuild mode. That is where they're taking this franchise. They're going to get younger, and the Steelers are on the complete other side of the spectrum where they are investing in the talent right now, spending the money that they got, and now they're going to have to go get a quarterback. Personally, I think the Seahawks, if you want to just go completely into whatever you want to do, and that's your direction of the franchise, this is probably the best move because you probably weren't going to pay him $30 million per year. And if you're the Steelers, this all works out if you could get a competent quarterback. But I don't think that person was on the roster last year, unfortunately.
Could you see Arch Manning in a Seahawks jersey, or is that too outlandish?
Oh no, I definitely could. And I
Okay.
also don't think that the Seahawks organization is, you know, they're not dysfunctional, right? So I wouldn't put that past them. Now, hey, you got 1 year. You got 1 year that you got to suffer. Maybe they go get a bridge quarterback. Maybe they do give one of the other quarterbacks that are on the market an opportunity to be that bridge quarterback.
I think if you make the moves that you do, you can't get a bridge quarterback. You just sold away like essentially your best, like two of your better players. Obviously, Jackson Smith and Jigba has stepped up as like the wide receiver one for them by the end of that season. But I mean, Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf were still two producers on that team. And then you trade away DK Metcalf. And then all the long list of names that you mentioned. I don't think that you can make all those moves and even try and say that you're going to be competitive next year if they are, then why make those moves? So I mean, I think they're looking forward to the future. And like you mentioned, I don't think the Seahawks are a dysfunctional franchise. So they're looking forward to the future, and the moves that they're making right now just don't make any sense for this season. So getting a bridge quarterback and having him possibly win a couple games and taking what would be the future for them I don't know if that makes all that much sense to me, but I mean,
it's a tale. Yeah, go.
I was just gonna say, like, teams do it all the time, like where you think that they're like they're trading away their assets and doing all this stuff, and then they go ahead and get like an older quarterback towards that tail end of his career to be a bridge quarterback for almost no reason. So I could see it happening. I just think that for the sake of their franchise, it makes more sense to like possibly like tank and get a guy like Arch Manning or Nico Yameliov or whoever's coming out of the next draft.
Well, I think you kind of said my point initially at the very end there. I didn't really mean it as in they would get a bridge quarterback because they want to win a couple more games than they would otherwise. I just think that that's just the way that it just needs to go. They just need to get a veteran quarterback, and that is the bridge quarterback. Like, I don't think they're going to go out and spend any money on like a Sam Darnold or anything like that. I just think that that's how you tank. Jameis Winston. I just think that's how you tank. That's how you prepare for the future. Is you do get a bridge quarterback and you just bring him in for 1 year and then you cut him next year. You don't do what the Falcons did, right? You don't go get Kirk Cousins and draft a guy, right? So if they get a bridge quarterback or something like that, maybe they don't get a guy in the draft, and vice versa, right? So that is the way that I see it, and that's why I kind of thought that they would, but nobody of note, right? We're not talking about Aaron Rodgers going to the Seahawks. So I think they're going to prepare and do it well. But yeah, tail oldest time. You win too many games on accident and you drop that number one overall pick, the second pick, third pick, whatever it is. It happens every single year. So maybe it's not the way to go, right? But well, we've mentioned his name a few times already in this episode, Sam Darnold. He's got some buyers. He's got a market, a lot of movement going on. We mentioned the Steelers would be potentially in the market to go get Aaron Rodgers. Well, Sam Darnold also available. Where do you think he's going to end up?
I know we talked about it last show, and you weren't a big fan of the move, but I think he could. I could see him back in the Big Apple. I could see him back as a Giant. They're the second highest betted odds for him to. I think they said like some. I'm not even gonna try and list the odds right now because I don't have them on me. But they are the second favorite to land Sam Darnold at this point. They jumped Minnesota as soon as they didn't franchise tag him. I think that it could be a good fit. You have an offensive like I was saying last time. Sam Darnold to the Giants makes sense because you have an offensive mind in Brian Daboll. You have a good running back that you just drafted. You have a number one receiver now. If you go out and get somebody, you get some offensive line help, and you get maybe a wide receiver too in the draft or during the offseason, I think it could genuinely work. And obviously, maybe he'll go back to seeing ghosts. But that Jets franchise has just been dysfunctional for the longest time. You put Hall of Fame quarterbacks in there, and it still doesn't work. So something could just be wrong with the Jets in general. I think that the Giants are a lot better. Obviously, they made the playoffs with Daniel Jones before he turned back into a pumpkin. So I don't I think it could work, and they're obviously Vegas doesn't hate it either because they're the second current betting favorite. So I could see it happening, and the team around him, it doesn't look that bad. Like they were winning, they were being competitive in games with Tommy DeVito. Like if you get a Sam, if you think that Sam Darnold is better than some of those guys, I don't. And then you also still have the number 3 pick in the draft. So if you get Sam Darnold and then you can move off of quarterback, you have a lot you can do with that. You can move down and maybe get even more for the future. I think that the Giants situation isn't the worst in the world. And you have guys on that defense too, like Kayvon Thibodeau. Like you have guys on that team where it's not the worst team in the world. And the Giants don't suck. They just didn't have a quarterback last year, in my opinion.
So a couple things there. I don't hate it. I just don't think it fits right for his career. I think, as you mentioned, the Jets, a graveyard, total quarterback graveyard. The Browns, probably still kind of like that, right? But definitely like that when we were growing up, watching all those quarterbacks go in the door and out the door until Baker Mayfield got there. I think it takes a really big culture guy who's also extremely talented to flip the switch on a franchise like that. And I just don't know if that's going to be Sam Darnold wherever he goes. I think he needs a little bit more cushion. And I think that they have the pieces. They certainly had a great draft last year to help with that. But I just think it just doesn't fit to me. And I just don't know if he would pass up like that comfort, even for more money, like coming from the Vikings to make that move and go to the Giants. I really just don't know if I see that, but I understand exactly where you're coming from. I also just think that he needs to beware of the bridge quarterback situation where you do feel like you are the guy for the Giants and you sign, and then a month later they go draft a guy at 3 because the top 2 teams didn't take a quarterback or something like that, right? Or there was one of the quarterbacks that you said, oh, well, if he's available at 3, we'll take him, right? And that's the guy that you guys like, and he ends up being there at 3, whoever that might be. I mean, it's obviously not a crazy quarterback draft, not top heavy, but I definitely think that that's something that I feel like I've seen over the last 10 years happen every other offseason, where there's a guy who gets that second chance, goes to a team, and then they end up drafting a quarterback, and it's like, well, we fell in love with him. So that's where I think the Giants might end up. But I did want to say, Diana Rossini, well-respected voice and reporter. She did report something today, and I should have said this at the very beginning of this part, but here we go. The Steelers are expected to make an offer to pending free agent Sam Darnold. That's a little bit surprising, right? Many around the league believe Darnold will wind up in Seattle, while Pittsburgh is doing its due diligence on any potential options ahead of the new league year. I don't think either of us are really buying Sam Darnold to Pittsburgh, but if they don't get Aaron Rodgers, he might be the first domino to fall. Then maybe he goes to Pittsburgh or Seattle.
You said that Seattle's a buyer on Sam Darnold?
Also, that's what they already also believe that he was. That's a bridge quarterback. That is what it is for sure. But I think that would be too much money. But that's what Diana Rossini reported.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about bridge,
I don't know if I buy either of those destinations, but I could see it. I don't know who I buy. I think he probably just ends up going back to the Vikings.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that too. The Seattle fit would be, if we're talking about fits that just don't work, that would just be god awful. Like you don't have any of the things I was talking about in the Giants, that they have like a really good draft pick as well as like some pieces around him. You lose a lot of that with the Seahawks, and would the Seahawks want to pay him what the quarterback market is right now? He's probably going to go for north of $40 million a year, like at least. So I cannot say. I'd be shocked if he went to the Seahawks. So I think that's more like that could be like a smokescreen-esque type of thing.
It definitely could be a smokescreen. I know it sounded a little backwards when I presented it, but just a report coming out there that a lot of people believed he could potentially end up in Seattle. I think with the Raiders move, it kind of threw a lot of things off. So there's kind of been a bit of a like reshuffling as far as the quarterback market and who wants to invest in the draft. I think if Seattle were to do that, I agree. It doesn't make any sense. That's too high of a bridge quarterback. But some of these franchises they might not even really see him as a starter long term. Maybe they want him to be there for 2 years and they want it to kind of overlap with an Arch Manning, right? In his rookie year, maybe they're okay with that. And they're thinking, well, why not? Gives us some leeway, some cushion, and they don't really know how many games they're going to win, or they'll make it some sort of team friendly thing where they can cut him after next year. I don't know. And also, I just don't think that Pittsburgh really fits him. I think it's too much of a gamble. I think that they just want Rodgers. But like I said, if Rodgers goes somewhere else, then maybe they will have to make a push to go get Darnold because it looks like they're going to let Fields walk.
Too high of a bridge quarterback from the Seattle side. I'm going to go
Yeah.
back to that for a second. Too high of a bridge quarterback and way too much money for them. Like I just don't know how that would make any sense for the Seattle Seahawks to go, especially with the moves that they're making. If they keep DK Metcalf, they'd pay him a big contract. If you don't release Tyler Lockett, even though Tyler Lockett he didn't have the biggest impact by the end of last season. So you can still release Tyler Lockett. But the moves that you listed and that they made, that would essentially mean that they're going to retool or like depending on how long the contract is. Obviously, if it's 1 or 2 years, then maybe not. But like, that would essentially be retooling against Sam Darnold because if you have any belief in him, you think he can win a couple of games, then you're going to be out of the quarterback market for next season, like drafting wise. And then like it just doesn't make any sense to pay a guy like that so much money. So I just can't get on board with the Seattle like I guess smoke screen, I guess you could call it, or whatever is going on with the reports over there. I think the Steelers or the Steelers, Giants, and Vikings probably make the most sense at this point with the Raiders going out and getting Gino.
Yeah, I definitely think the Vikings make the most sense. I mean, I've also seen in the odds, I believe this was before the Raiders trade, the Browns and the Titans were right up there as well at being potential destinations. But I think they're in the quarterback draft market. So,
Yeah.
they're not really expecting to go get a guy like Sam Darnold. I think your analysis on the Seahawks is completely right. But if there's anything going on in the league, I respect reports like that, but everybody's lying at this point in time, right? And this also isn't to say that these people in the front office don't make incorrect moves too. Like they're wrong all the time, just as much as they're right. So definitely they could end up being wrong about Sam Darnold.
Yeah, I like some of these things that are getting thrown out, just like always throwing me through a loop because I understand some of it's smokescreen, some of it's like not real, but that just doesn't make any sense to me. I couldn't imagine what the Seahawks would be trying to do going down and getting Sam Darnold. The Steelers makes a lot more sense from like if he was going to leave anywhere else. I think Steelers like I was saying, Steelers, Giants, Vikings, those have got to be the top 3 destinations for him.
I got one more, and then we'll get out of here and we'll make our final pick on where we think Sam Darnold is going to go. Okay. Colts. Just because their front office has said that they want to bring in a veteran quarterback who can challenge Anthony Richardson for the starting job. I think they essentially want to sit Anthony Richardson at the start of the season or something along those lines. They want to light a fire under him. Maybe that is the best fit for him. They do have a decent team around Anthony Richardson, and that whole last season just kind of fell apart after he kind of asked to go out of the game, and then Joe Flacco came in for a few weeks. I would say, and I can't believe we were forgetting about this at the very beginning when we were talking about it, that the Colts are my pick. It's either the Colts or the Vikings, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of already said my 2 cents. I think that Steelers, Vikings makes the most sense to me. Colts are definitely on that list too. But
what about the Giants?
What? Oh, yeah.
Giants?
Sorry. Giants and Vikings. I got all wrapped up in the Steelers talk. My fault. But yeah, Giants or Vikings would probably be my pick. The Steelers are also like, again, I've named that list 3 separate times already. That those lists of 3 teams are my top 3, just for comfort level, and it makes the most sense situationally at this point. At least my opinion.
All right. Well, we talked about a lot: college basketball, the NBA, and the NFL. Lots of different contract stuff going on right now for the NFL. Josh Allen has 4 more years left on his contract. He just got paid $320 or $330 million, $250 million guaranteed. That's a huge number. Maybe we'll talk about that next time. This has been the Big Little Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Previty. That's Andrew Greig. We'll see you guys next time.